Tough to watch. I want to bring in my panel, Cheryl Dorsey, retired LAPD sergeant and author of Black and Blue, The Creation of a Manifesto, and CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. So Joey, let's begin with you in that very disturbing video we just watched. Based on what you saw in that video and the other evidence that's been made public, does it make sense to you that these officers were not charged?
It does not. Let me give you my human reaction, Anna, if I can, and then I'll give you my legal reaction. From a human perspective, it's appalling. Here's why. Officers are taught to de-escalate a situation. You're trained. You encounter many things that you and I, quite frankly, are not qualified to encounter. It's part of the training. It's part of their DNA. It's part of who they are. My father was one. I get and I understand, may he rest in peace, what they go through. But the reality is that, you know, when you escalate something to this that leads in a death, it just becomes alarming, disturbing, unnecessary, and something has to be done. Now to the legal in terms of the charges, I get that the federal government didn't pursue charges because the standard is quite high, Anna. From a federal civil rights perspective, you have to show specific intent and animus, evilness, wickedness in order to charge them with a civil rights violation. Very high standard, and so the federal government took a pass. When you get to the state level, there are so many tools that a state has in its box of prosecution that it could use that don't rise to intent. So if an officer, for example, is negligent or otherwise reckless in the encounter, then you do it there. And let me tell you what the problem is. And when I say reckless, these are legal terms. If you consciously disregard a risk, the officer comes and immediately is approaching, using profanity, I'll blow your head off, taking out his weapon and using it. I mean, is that not reckless or negligent in and of itself? And so then you get really to the critical issue of the investigation. People are tired of these investigations happening behind closed doors and then seeing officials come out there and make the same pronouncements after a long, exhaustive review, after coordinating with several agencies, after hiring experts. We have concluded, no, people want transparency. What do I mean? Right. Bring it in front of a jury. We can have a reasonable difference as to what occurred on that videotape, but let 12 people sit in a box after all the evidence is uncovered and the public has a right to know, and let a jury make a decision instead of an official making a unilateral determination not to charge. That's what's distressing so many communities.
What about you, Cheryl, having been in the shoes of those officers, being a police officer? What was your big takeaway from that video we just showed?
Well, as a police sergeant, I'm outraged. As a supervisor of patrol officers, I'm disgusted. That was an execution. We heard those officers threaten Mr. Sterling, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do. We're not trained or taught, and it shouldn't be tolerated, where you confront someone. I don't care if they're disruptive or if they're not cooperating. You don't get to use expletives when you refer to them. You don't get to threaten them. I will shoot you in your effing head if you don't be still. We're not taught to execute and kill people because they don't comply, because they won't be still. And the fact that this officer was fired brings me no comfort. He needs to be charged with a criminal offense. He needs to be convicted of a criminal offense, because what happens is this officer may very well find himself in a week or two on another police department where obviously he's learned nothing here and do this very same thing again. We don't need another Alton Sterling. I'm outraged.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about Stephon Clark, because a lot of people are outraged over this case as well. Police, wanting to be transparent, they say, released the videos from that incident almost immediately, just a couple of days after the shooting itself happened. And now we have, Joey, this independent autopsy that has come out, a request that was from the family of Stephon Clark, specifically showing he was mostly shot in the back and his side, and his leg seems to contradict what the police say happened, in that he was moving toward them when they opened fire. How does this play?
You know, Anna, this is what we call irrefutable evidence. We can talk about, the police can give a narrative as to what happened. They were fearful. He was approaching them. He had his hands up. He was in a stance towards them. But when you see evidence like this, does that not contradict that? I mean, in looking at an autopsy, which gives you an indication, you had the video, the screen right there, of exactly where he's hit. How does that jibe, or otherwise, how is that consistent with the narrative that you felt threatened, that you were in imminent fear?
But again, this was an independent independent autopsy. This wasn't the official autopsy by the coroner.
I get it, but so does the official coroner autopsy. Would that say something different? I guess that's for a trial to decide.
That's what I wonder. Does it make a difference of who's doing it?
I think it makes a difference in terms of you want to make sure that whoever's hands are on an autopsy, that it could be trusted by people who evaluate this. But let me tell you, in addition to the autopsy, briefly, what concerns me about this. When the police got the phone call, Anna, it was about vandalism of cars. That informs the judgment of the officers. It goes to their state of mind. They didn't get a call that there was a murderer on the loose, that there was someone rummaging and trying to get into buildings, that there was someone raping someone. It was vandalism. And then you go and you give the command to show your hands, and you say you thought it was a cell phone. Should someone be executed? Well, we know it's a cell phone after the fact, but should someone be executed for having a cell phone? And if strategically, he appeared in a stance like this, then maybe you should have asked him to get onto the ground, and then you don't render aid after it. I mean, this is just a problem, and we have to address this. This is a divide across the country, and, you could see and understand why the outrage is there, and God bless that community for coming together, taking a stance, and the Sacramento Kings for doing what they've been doing and being vocal about this. It has to stop.
Again, we mentioned the video, Cheryl, has been put out there. This independent autopsy result has come out. We don't have the details from the official autopsy done by the coroner, but what do you make of how the investigators have done their work and what information they've now revealed to the public?
Well, listen, a shot in the back is a shot in the back, and so I don't know what the official police department coroner autopsy is going to show, and I understand that police departments have a symbiotic relationship with the coroner, so I hope that it's not very contrary to what the independent autopsy showed. But these officers acted reckless and without regard. They were in a position of cover and concealment. They had an air unit overhead. There was no exigent circumstance that required or caused them to engage this young man if they suspected that he was involved in property damage only criminality. And so for them to execute him and fire 20 rounds, 8 of which struck him in the back, is outrageous, is over the top. And for the police chief to say that he released the video to bring us comfort and then say he could understand or maybe provide a reason why they would mute their camera doesn't really sound like someone who's going to be transparent. It sounds more like circling of the wagons, and let's minimize and mitigate this shooting that should have never occurred.
Thank you both for the thoughtful discussion. Really great to have you both, Joey Jackson and Cheryl Dorsey. Have a great rest of the weekend. And coming up,
Thank you.